Welcome to today's Explainer. I am so excited you're here because we are unpacking one of the absolute coolest ancient mysteries in human history, the geological origins of the gates to hell. Now, I know, that sounds exactly like a fantasy novel, right? But this is a story grounded entirely in hard, undeniable science. We're going to look at these seemingly supernatural, utterly deadly caves that terrified our ancestors, and we're going to break down exactly what was really going on. If you love a good mystery and want the logical answers behind it, well, you're in the perfect place.
Okay, let's just jump right into our core mystery. Why on earth do these ancient caves kill anyone who got too close? Just put yourself in the shoes of someone living thousands of years ago. You're walking near a cave or maybe a deep fissure in the earth, and suddenly you see an animal wander near the entrance and it just drops dead. No warning, no visible predator at all, no physical trauma, just instant death. For ancient people, this wasn't just a story. It was a terrifying, undeniable reality. These literal gates to hell were seemingly striking people and animals dead just for coming near them. It was a physical phenomenon, and it demanded an explanation.
And honestly, the explanation they came up with makes perfect, terrifying sense. Because these sites consistently killed those who approached, they were naturally believed to be direct pathways to the underworld. Just imagine the terror. For thousands of years, these deadly sites weren't just spooky campfire stories. They were interpreted as absolute, physical proof of supernatural curses. I mean, if you can't see what's killing the bird flying over the cave, the only logical conclusion for an ancient mind is dark magic. It was the underworld reaching up and claiming a life. It was a very real danger, and creating a myth around it was basically their way of putting up a giant keep out sign to protect their community.
Now here is where we make our big shift. We have this ancient worldview of supernatural curses, but we need to look at the modern reality, which is localized environmental chemistry. We're essentially executing an illusionist reframe here. We are taking off that ancient lens of magic and slapping on the modern lens of science. Because what our ancestors were experiencing wasn't a curse from the gods of the underworld at all. It was actually a highly localized, naturally occurring chemical hazard. The danger was totally real, the deaths were absolutely real, but the mechanism, it wasn't magic, it was molecular.
And that beautifully illustrates our core takeaway for today. Ancient myths were often just early data interpretations of complex geological events. This is absolutely crucial because it completely changes how we view history. We really shouldn't talk down to our ancestors or just assume they were gullible. Instead, try looking at them as early scientists. They were gathering data like the undeniable fact that bodies piled up near certain caves, and they were trying to interpret that invisible geological data using literally the only framework they had available, which was mythology and religion. They observed a complex geological event and, well, they wrote a myth to explain the data.
Let's ground this whole thing in a real-world context with one of the most famous sites of all, the Plutonian at Hierapolis. This wasn't some fairy tale. The Plutonian was a physical stone gateway in an ancient city located in modern-day Turkey. It was a destination. People traveled there. They watched the ceremonies. They literally saw animals get led to the gate and instantly collapse. To them, it looked like the invisible hand of Pluto, the god of the underworld, was just striking them down. It was this massive, awe-inspiring spectacle of seemingly divine power.
So what's the actual culprit hiding behind the mask here? Carbon dioxide. This invisible poison gas was being emitted from ancient sites like the Plutonian in incredibly high, deadly concentrations. It wasn't a divine curse, it was just a heavy, suffocating gas seeping out of the Earth's crust due to deep seismic activity. And because carbon dioxide is heavier than the standard air we breathe, it pools right down close to the ground. Small animals or humans who bent down near the entrance would inhale this concentrated gas and quickly suffocate. The Earth was quite literally exhaling poison, completely invisible to the naked eye.
But hold on, because here is where the story gets incredibly fascinating. If the gas killed everyone, how on earth did anyone ever go near it? Well, the ancient priests operating at these temples seemed completely immune. During ceremonies, a priest would lead an animal right up to the cave. The animal drops dead, but the priest just stands there, completely unharmed. To the masses watching, they appeared to possess absolute divine protection. I mean, to the onlookers, this was undeniable proof that these priests were chosen by the gods, capable of surviving the literal breath of the underworld. Talk about the ultimate ancient power play, right?
But as we know now, it wasn't some divine right. It was essentially the ultimate ancient magic trick. Their secret? Find thin pockets of oxygen and hold your breath. It's brilliant. These priests were incredible survivalists who cleverly exploited a little environmental loophole. Because they spent so much time observing the cave, they realized the deadly gas pooled at the very bottom.
So by standing tall and keeping their heads elevated in the safer, breathable air, or just by taking a huge breath and holding it when they had to dip down, they survived. They understood the local environmental chemistry better than anyone else, and they totally used that physical knowledge to perform a supernatural miracle.
And that brings us to a really crucial question, one I want to leave ringing in your ears. What other ancient supernatural curses are just waiting for a chemical explanation? Today, we took the terrifying gates to hell and reduced them to a highly localized carbon dioxide emission manipulated by some very observant priests. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? When we look back at the curses, the plagues, and the magical events of antiquity, how many of them are really just complex geological or chemical events wrapped up in a mythological package? I challenge you to take this scientific lens with you as you explore history. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer today. Keep questioning everything, and I'll catch you next time.